On May 27, the Chinese Communist Party's Shandong aircraft carrier sailed through the Taiwan Strait. Shortly after, the U.S. military released a video from May 26 showing a provocative interception by a Chinese J-16 fighter jet of a U.S. RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft. The Chinese military quickly responded by exposing the airspace above the Shandong aircraft carrier where the U.S. reconnaissance plane was present. Although the J-15 fighters on board the Shandong seemed to remain grounded, the J-16 fighters were dispatched from the Southern Theater Command on land. This action exposed the true nature of China's claimed strategic deterrence in the Taiwan Strait. On May 30, a video released by the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command showed a Chinese J-16 fighter jet intercepting a U.S. RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft over the South China Sea on May 26. The U.S. military accused the Chinese fighter jet of displaying unprofessional and aggressive behavior. On May 31, the Chinese Southern Theater Command responded by stating that on May 26, during a routine training exercise of the Chinese Navy's 17th Fleet in the South China Sea, a U.S. RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft deliberately intruded into their training area for reconnaissance interference. The Southern Theater Command claimed that they organized air forces to track and monitor the U.S. aircraft throughout the incident. The Shandong aircraft carrier bears the hull number 17, and when the Shandong aircraft carrier and its escort ships set sail, it is generally referred to as the 17th Fleet deployment. In response to the U.S. accusations, the Chinese side voluntarily disclosed the airspace above the Shandong aircraft carrier where the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft was present. On May 26, the Shandong was likely passing through the South China Sea on its way to the Taiwan Strait and crossed the Taiwan Strait from south to north around noon on May 27. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, attempted to defend the interception of the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft by the J-16 fighters by claiming that the U.S. aircraft intruded into the training area of the Shandong aircraft carrier. However, their attempt to justify the action backfired. The CCP stated that the Shandong was conducting training in the South China Sea but did not specify it as an exercise. They did not designate a specific exercise area, nor did they declare it off-limits to other vessels or aircraft. Therefore, the claim of the U.S. aircraft intruding into their training area is highly questionable. The South China Sea is international waters, and the Chinese Navy can conduct training exercises, while civilian and military vessels and aircraft from other countries are free to pass through or conduct their own exercises. If the Shandong aircraft carrier was indeed conducting training and encountered the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft, the J-15 fighter should have immediately taken off to provide surveillance and engage in confrontation, or even conduct a deterrence operation as often claimed by the CCP. However, the J-15 fighters were not seen, and it was the J-16 fighters from the Southern Theater Command that were dispatched, which raises suspicions. The CCP did not disclose the details, but it is likely that the Shandong aircraft carrier did not have J-15 fighters on board. When they detected the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft approaching, they could only helplessly watch as the U.S. aircraft took photos and collected information. It is estimated that the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft circled back and remained in the area, refusing to leave. Under such circumstances, the CCP had no choice but to order the deployment of the Southern Theater Command's Air Force. Feeling embarrassed, the CCP allowed the J-16 pilots to engage in aggressive behavior. The Chinese pilots flying the fighter jets, encountering a non-threatening U.S. reconnaissance aircraft, naturally took the opportunity to perform and seek recognition. This resulted in another dangerous confrontation between the Chinese and U.S. military forces. On May 27, the Taiwanese military reported that the Shandong aircraft carrier, escorted by 2 warships, passed through the Taiwan Strait, traveling from west to north along the median line of the Taiwan Strait. The Chinese Global Times, citing military experts, stated that the passage of the Shandong carrier through the Taiwan Strait has become a regular occurrence. They claimed that the Shandong carrier's passage through the Taiwan Strait carries strategic deterrence and serves as a warning to Taiwan independence and external forces. In December 2019, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, announced the delivery of the Shandong aircraft carrier in Sanya, Hainan, with Xi Jinping attending the ceremony. However, shortly after, the Shandong carrier quickly returned to Dalian shipyard via the Taiwan Strait. It was not actually fully completed but was declared delivered 1 year earlier for political reasons. In December 2020, the Shandong carrier made another trip to Hainan, marking its official delivery. On March 18, 2022, the Shandong carrier once again crossed the Taiwan Strait and returned to Dalian shipyard for maintenance. In April this year, The Shandong carrier conducted its first long-distance training in the waters of the Philippines for about half a month before returning to its base in Hainan. On May 27, the Shandong carrier passed through the Taiwan Strait heading north, likely indicating its return to the shipyard for maintenance once again. Chinese experts are making baseless claims and are unaware of the actual situation. On May 26, as the Shandong aircraft carrier was passing through the South China Sea towards the Taiwan Strait, it encountered a USRC-135 reconnaissance aircraft. However, it appears that the Shandong carrier did not have J-15 fighter jets on board and could only call for support from the Southern Theater Command's J-16 fighters. The Shandong was not engaged in training but was simply passing through. On May 26, the Taiwanese military reported detecting a total of 8 instances of Chinese military aircraft, with 5 instances crossing the median line and its extension into the southwestern airspace. These instances involved Su-30 and J-10 fighters, as well as a Y-8 anti-submarine aircraft, but there was no trace of J-15 fighters. Several days have passed, and neither Japan nor Taiwan has reported any further news regarding the Shandong aircraft carrier. It is likely that the Shandong was not conducting training near Taiwan but was heading back to the Dalian shipyard. The Shandong aircraft carrier has only conducted one relatively short long-distance training voyage, and the rest of the time it occasionally operates in nearby waters. It still requires maintenance and repairs, and its actual operational readiness time is quite limited. The Liaoning aircraft carrier is undergoing maintenance at the shipyard, the Shandong has returned for maintenance, and the Fujian has yet to undergo a proper sea trial. It seems that the Chinese Navy does not have any operational aircraft carriers, let alone the ability to engage in 4-line operations. The Chinese aircraft carrier's passage through the Taiwan Strait has been seen by the outside world as a provocative move by China towards Taiwan, at least with political implications. However, in reality, it is a move of necessity for the Chinese Navy. The Shandong aircraft carrier needs to return to the shipyard for maintenance, either by sailing north through the Taiwan Strait or by taking a route around the eastern side of Taiwan. If it takes the route around the eastern side, it would have to pass through the Bashi Strait into the Philippine Sea, then sail north through the Miyako Strait into the East China Sea before reaching the Dalian shipyard. This route is longer and takes the carrier further away from the Chinese coastline. It would require a complete fleet escort, including supply vessels and carrier-based aircraft, as sailing an empty carrier in the Philippine Sea and encountering American or Japanese fighter jets or warships would be awkward. If the Shandong carrier were to sail around Taiwan, approximately 5,000 crew members would need to accompany it, as the carrier cannot operate at full capacity without them. These 5,000 personnel are based in Hainan and are under the jurisdiction of the Southern Theater Command. Once they reach Dalian, arranging for their accommodation, meals, daily routines, and training becomes a challenging task. During the carrier's maintenance period, it would be difficult for the Northern Theater Command to sustain them, so it is likely that these 5,000 personnel would be sent back to Hainan. When the carrier's maintenance is completed, they would have to travel from Hainan back to Dalian to rejoin the carrier. The trouble is not just the back and forth of these 5,000 personnel. The J-15 fighter jets and pilots aboard the Shandong aircraft carrier are also affiliated with the Southern Theater Command. After reaching Dalian, they would have to fly back to the Southern Theater Command, possibly making at least 1 or 2 refueling stops in the Eastern or Central Theater Command. When the carrier maintenance is completed, these J-15 jets would have to fly back to Dalian again. The escort fleet would also have to navigate back and forth at sea. Within the Chinese Communist Party, there are restrictions on the movement of forces and their deployment between different theater commands. It requires orders issued by the Central Military Commission or Xi Jinping himself, otherwise, it may raise suspicions of mutiny. When the Chinese aircraft carrier returns to the shipyard, if it takes the route around the eastern side of Taiwan, it indeed involves such complications. This is quite different from the U.S. military, where any U.S. military unit or equipment entering a specific theater command falls under the command of that theater command. The most convenient route for the Chinese aircraft carrier to pass through the Taiwan Strait would be to do so without carrying any aircraft, with only a small number of crew members operating the ship, making the operation much easier. By sailing along the coastline, there would be no need for replenishment ships or additional warship escorts. However, when crossing the Taiwan Strait, the Chinese aircraft carrier cannot demonstrate its combat capabilities and can only maintain a low profile. The statements made by Chinese military experts are actually self-derogatory. If the CCP initiates a conflict, the Taiwan Strait will be the most dangerous area, where any warship could be sunk by enemy shore-based anti-ship missiles. The regular transit of U.S. Aegis destroyers through the Taiwan Strait is mainly a political gesture and would not be done during wartime. Even U.S. aircraft carriers would not take such a risk by allowing their multi-billion-dollar assets to pass through the hostile Taiwan Strait. U.S. warships rarely approach the coast of mainland China and would stay beyond the range of CCP's shore-based anti-ship missiles. Even the CCP aircraft carriers and large warships are reluctant to easily cross the Taiwan Strait during wartime. The Shandong aircraft carrier would be unable to return for repairs and would be confined to a port. The main naval bases of the CCP's Eastern Theater Command are located in Zhoushan, Zhejiang, and Shanghai, deliberately positioned beyond the range of Taiwan's shore-based anti-ship missiles. However, if the CCP were to attack Taiwan, it would require significant efforts. Once a war breaks out, it would be difficult for the CCP's naval forces in the south and north to support each other. The South Sea Fleet would not dare to cross the Taiwan Strait and move north, while the North Sea and East Sea Fleets would not dare to cross the Taiwan Strait and move south. The Bashi Strait and Miyako Strait would be blocked by the US and Allied forces, isolating the CCP's naval forces in the southern and northern regions and making them vulnerable to individual attacks. The Taiwan Strait is indeed a strategic vulnerability for the CCP's navy. If the CCP were to initiate a war, it would essentially be targeting its own vulnerability. The CCP has been eager to find a solution to this critical vulnerability but has never been confident in achieving victory. Now with the US military prepared and on alert, the CCP is even more hesitant to take action. The US military will never allow the CCP to unlock this vulnerability, as it would complicate matters for the US. If the CCP were to seize Taiwan, CCP nuclear submarines could easily enter the Pacific from the eastern coast of Taiwan, and the Taiwan Strait would be considered an internal sea for the CCP. The CCP's naval forces could establish bases in eastern Taiwan and achieve north-south connectivity. U.S. warships would face greater challenges crossing the Taiwan Strait and would also have difficulty passing through the Bashi Strait, severely restricting their movements in the South Sea. The U.S.'s global deployments and efforts to maintain freedom of navigation would be significantly hindered. In such a scenario, the incumbent Indo-Pacific commander would likely be swiftly relieved of duty, and the top priority for the new commander would be to regain control of Taiwan. After a sudden escalation in tensions between Chinese and American fighter jets, the U.S. military released a video, which forced the Chinese Communist Party to proactively disclose the truth about the Shandong aircraft carrier. This action can be seen as a manifestation of their unease. In the statement from the Southern Theater Command of the People's Liberation Army, they claimed that the theater forces remain highly vigilant and resolutely safeguard national sovereignty, security, and the peace and stability of the South China Sea. However, when the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft approached the Chinese aircraft carrier, the Southern Theater Command only mentioned organizing aerial forces to track and monitor without stating promptly dispatching interception or driving away. The Chinese Communist Party continues its domestic propaganda efforts while attempting to ease tensions externally. On June 1, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin mentioned in Tokyo that it was unfortunate that Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu refused to meet with him during the Shangri-La dialogue. He further expressed concern over the provocative interceptions conducted by China in the international airspace and waters of the region, targeting both American and Allied aircraft. He stated, "I worry that at some point there's going to be an incident that could spark a crisis." The Chinese leadership is likely also concerned about the situation spiraling out of control. It would be highly disadvantageous for China if an armed conflict were to erupt in the South China Sea before a resolution in the Taiwan Strait. If a war were to break out between China and the United States in the South China Sea, the U.S. military could easily destroy China's artificial islands, and neighboring countries might secretly rejoice or even openly support the U.S. military's actions. While the Chinese J-16 fighters were dispatched to intercept the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft, it should be noted that in an actual war scenario, the opponents would likely be the U.S. F-22 or F-35 fighters. Currently, U.S. reconnaissance aircraft conduct close surveillance and closely monitor any movements of the Chinese military, but during a wartime situation, they would not easily approach the Chinese coastline unless the Chinese Air Force is thoroughly defeated and the coastal air defense systems are completely destroyed. On May 31, the Chinese state-run Global Times stated, "U.S. reconnaissance aircraft are only about 50 kilometers away from our coastline, and it is necessary to drive away U.S. aircraft." However, the Southern Theater Command of the People's Liberation Army did not disclose the exact location of the standoff nor dare to claim that they drove away the U.S. aircraft. While the U.S. Secretary of Defense issued a warning about the potential for an accidental clash, the Chinese military responded in a relatively low-key manner. This recent confrontation once again exposed China's true intentions.